have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this wonderful land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon. We're welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that much of the world finds itself in. And as you know, we called this program Character Matters because I believe that it does matter. It matters more than anything else. Who we are as people, how we conduct ourselves, the values that we hold, not just the values we profess, but the values that we live out in our daily lives. This is what freedom depends upon. This is what civilization depends upon. So it's been my life's work for the past 25 or 30 years or so to carry the message that character does indeed matter, and that a lot of our problems, vast majority of our problems in the world today, have to do with the character crisis that we're in. And there are a lot of factors at play there, a lot of reasons for this. And every now and then we get a very stark example. I've mentioned many times before that freedom faces two great enemies. The enemy from within. We have too many people, unfortunately, of such poor character residing within our own borders that we too often cheat each other, mistreat each other. Greed on Wall Street is only one small example of how our own character problems here at home have cost us deeply. We almost brought our country to a screeching halt, economically to its knees. We're still in trouble, in big trouble. The economy is nowhere near as robust as those who are cooking the books and fudging the numbers would like you to believe. And of course, we're in debt up to our eyeballs. But we face another enemy, and that's from without. And make no mistake, the enemy is dead serious. And because, like with all character disturbance, at the heart of what's wrong is the way people think. It's the values they hold. It's the way people think, their core beliefs. And we have an ideology at work in the world today. We've seen similar ideologies before. We saw the Aryan supremacist ideology before and what it could do. So we've been here, we've done that many times before. But the world faces a great foe, a great threat to civilization and to freedom. And unless we confront the true problem directly, we're not going to win the security that we seek. We're just not going to prevail. We had another very stark example just this past week, another tragic example of two individuals. By the way, I hate this word radicalized. It's kind of like you walk into a chamber, something's done to you, and you come out an entirely different person. Or you take a training course. This term is bandied about like that can actually really happen. We're going to talk about this today. Yes, there are brainwashing kinds of things that can happen to individuals. Yes, you can put an individual in such extreme mental state that you alter their thinking and get them to thinking like they wouldn't normally think. Yes, you can manipulate environments so that people alter their thinking. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about an ideology that some people find really attractive. And that goes to character. What draws someone to such an ideology? Why do they go there in the first place? What's attractive about that? That always says something about us and who we are as a person. When we find something so evil or so destructive attractive, that's always a reflection of our own ill character health. And so we got another stark example of it this week in two individuals who took the lives, sadly, of some folks who were daring to celebrate at a Christmas party. I'll have some things to say about that, too. But I'm really very interested in what the thinking is out there among the listeners tonight about some of these things. Because we're going to see more and more of this. We're going to see more and more, unfortunately, of both the enemy from without and the enemy within. Twisted thinking, misplaced attitudes, dangerous ideologies threaten our freedom, threaten our very civilization, indeed threaten our very existence. These are trying times indeed. And if you have some thoughts you want to share on the subject, I invite you to give us a call. It's 718, 717-8296, 718-717-8296. That's the number to call if you want to join the conversation. I also invite you to visit my blog at manipulative-people.com, Manipulative-people.com is the blog that is dedicated to informing the general public about the various expressions of character disturbance that you're going to encounter in your lives, from manipulative people to narcissists to sociopaths. All the information that you need about such folks and how to deal with them and how to empower yourself if you're in a relationship of any kind with such folks is posted in one of the articles at manipulative-people.com. I also invite you to visit the other blog that I write from at Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life at www.counselingwith2Ls.resource.com. That's counseling resource, all one word, .com, but counseling with 2 L's. Articles there, many articles written by me on the character issue and other timely articles as well. On that blog, I have the freedom to write about other things than just the typical character-related matters that I write about on my Manipulative-people blog. And then I also invite you to avail yourself of my books. My 3 books, The Judas Syndrome, written for the Christian faith community, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, the international bestseller and recognized definitive book on manipulative personalities, and my book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, the best-selling book about all the various impaired characters you're likely to meet out there and the kinds of distress they're likely to bring into your life and what you can do about it. And have some books that will be coming out pretty soon. One titled How Did We End Up Here? It's a book that you'll find helpful if you're one of those folks who is just now coming to some appreciation for the kind of toxic situation that you're in. If you're in a toxic relationship and you're saying to yourself, basically, how did this happen? Or if in the aftermath of such a relationship, you find yourself asking that very question. Or if you're a person who is speculating on the culture of the times and wondering how we got here as a society with respect to our character decline. If you're asking those questions, the book, How Did We End Up Here, is going to try to address those very concerns. So be looking for that. I'll give you more details about the publishing date. It should be available sometime early in the first of next year. So I'll have more information for you about that as time goes on. I'll also be doing some training workshops, starting with professionals and starting in January. I'll be announcing some locations, and you'll also be able to find information about my workshops on my blog at manipulative-people.com. The blog is undergoing some transformation and some updating. We will be fairly soon a multi-site entity, with my website being a part of it, the blog being enhanced, and some new additions, hopefully. One of them may involve a blog solely related to the sentiments expressed in the theme song that you hear play at the beginning and the close of the program. That song is a song written by my wife and I. It was written just before the turn of the new millennium, and I had it in mind as an anthem for the millennium. And the inspiration came to me when I was working on a book, as yet is still not finished, but a book on the relationship between freedom and character, and coming to realize how fundamentally intertwined freedom and character are. You know, we have a lot of folks now really going after the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Matter of fact, I saw an article today in the New York Times online by, I'm forgetting the name now, but by someone who appeared on the editorial page on the online edition, trying to illuminate folks about the intent of the framers in writing the Second Amendment, and making the case that we have all these documents that prove that the framers only had in mind, as stated in the first few words, a well-regulated militia being essential to a free state. Those words in the amendment itself were further proof for this person, as well as other writings by drafters of the Constitution and other luminaries at the time. They made the case that basically all that the framers had in mind was making sure that the states could defend themselves against outside attack. And completely ignoring, they also made the case that there was never any intent upon any of the framers' part in the drafting of that article for the right to bear arms for personal protection. That's totally a figment of the imagination of, say, the NRA. And so therefore, they were basically making the case that we would, if we could just enact enough gun control, we wouldn't have all these senseless shootings, these mass shootings, like we experienced once again this past week. Now, they didn't say anything about these folks who legally purchased these arms, or maybe legally. I'm not sure that they did legally purchase arms, because, you know, California has most stringent gun laws in the country, and two of the weapons that they used technically are illegal in California. So whether they actually purchased them in California or they were trades or whatnot, I don't know. But I think, frankly, that the law didn't stop them anyway. And even if they were purchased legally, the writer of this article failed to mention that these folks also had pipe bombs and other devices. Well, as far as I know, there's no push to curb the sale of pipes or pressure cookers or nails or any of the things that people are using to do these things. And the framers did have in mind, we know this from letters that many of them wrote, they did have in mind not only the individual's right to protect themselves, but the individual's right and the collective's right to protect themselves against any overly intrusive or any oppressive or any unjust government, including our own. These folks believed in the right of people to govern themselves. But here's the rub. The rub is that in order to do that, people have to be of good character. They have to have a solid internal moral compass, whereby they treat themselves and they treat one another with dignity and respect, and they hold firm, hold true certain values and principles that restrain them from doing the kinds of things that hurt people. This is what they had in mind. Good people can manage themselves, and they don't need a big entity making laws and regulations and governing people's lives. This is what I came to realize, and that's what inspired the theme song that you hear at the beginning and the close of the program. We've truly lost our way. And we don't know, because we've lost our way, we don't know our way out of this dual threat that we face. And I'll say it again, we face two great enemies, one from within and one from without. And they are both rooted in twisted, distorted, pathological thinking. And one of the things we've learned in psychology, I say I'm Dr. George Simon. Well, my training is in psychology. I'm a clinical psychologist. One of the things that happened in the profession over the past 20 years, a revolution of sorts, of paradigms, is that we have come to appreciate that the way we think about things, the feelings, the attitudes, and the core beliefs that we have, they influence our feelings and especially our actions. How we think largely determines how we act. Not what we say we think, but what we really think, how we really believe. That's what really motivates us. And so, once again, this past week, we see a stunning example of individuals with a really warped ideology. And what such thinking can do. What terror it can wrought. If such a person is so predisposed, if a person has on their mind, if what they're believing, what their attitude is, how they're thinking, if it's that people celebrating a Christmas party are not worthy of living because they blaspheme merely by having this party, and therefore, as infidels, they deserve death. And by carrying on a holy crusade, a jihad, they will themselves be martyrs. If that's the way somebody's thinking, then disaster is going to follow. And we're not looking in the right places to fix this, to address this. Bombing will not do it. You don't change a heart or a mind with a bomb. And you also don't do it by restricting the freedoms of decent people. which is how our government seems to want to do it all the time when stuff like this happens. It's really to the point of absurdity. It's so ridiculous. When I was first beginning my work in psychology, my professional practice, independent practice, I heard the same thing time and time again from colleagues who, like me, were facing an increasing number of individuals in professional practice whose problems were not related primarily to their fears or insecurities or hang-ups, but rather their character. And these colleagues also told me, well, there's nothing you can do about that. So they went about the traditional way of trying to help people by helping people process their feelings, uncover their quote-unquote unconscious fears and insecurities, looking at things and in places that were totally irrelevant to the problem. And what I found was that once I began to pay some attention to and direct some effort toward the things that really mattered, things actually began to change. I bothered to pay attention, for example, to the way it appeared somebody was thinking about something. The old psychology was you didn't challenge a person's belief system because who are you to judge? The old axiom for a therapist was you don't impose your values or standards. In fact, you don't impose any values or standards. Instead, you take a completely non-judgmental approach. That way, the person you're dealing with will share their innermost fears, insecurities, desires, blah, blah, blah. But when someone's problems or the problems that they cause others are in fact directly related to the way they think, to the attitudes they hold, I consider it malpractice not to tend to that. It would be analogous if someone comes to the dentist and they have a pain in their tooth, and that pain is actually due to an abscess, an infection, and not a mere cavity. It would be very irresponsible for the dentist to just drill and fill. When the problem is related to something else, if that's the cause, you address the cause. You tend to that. If you were a dentist who did that regularly, who tended to the wrong thing and did not address the root causes, your license would be gone eventually, or you probably wouldn't have much business, at least. So it seemed just patently absurd to me. Once I got into my clinical practice, it seemed patently absurd that so many of my colleagues were ignoring what was at the root of the problem. More than ignoring it, they were tending to things. They were tending to things that weren't going to make all that big a difference, because that's what they knew how to attend to. That's what they were trained to do. So we have the same kind of issue going on right now. We have an enemy. We have enemy within and without, both related to twisted thinking. And this enemy from without, this outside enemy, harbors an ideology that we've seen before and that must be addressed directly. This notion that in the name of this transcendent power, that this kind of behavior is not only okay, but meritorious, has to be challenged directly. Some would say it would inflame those who hold the faith who don't have such radical views. Well, if it did, then that would say something about both those holding the faith and the faith itself. But I don't think that's going to be true. And I don't think we need to be tiptoeing around the issue any longer. And I certainly don't think we need to be looking everywhere else. In my book, In Sheep's Clothing, I call that manipulation tactic diversion. Magicians are wonderful at their use of that. They distract you on purpose. The way they position their hands, the way they speak about things, the way they use their eye movements, they want to direct you to some place or thing so that you won't see what's going on someplace else. That's how you get manipulated. And that's how you think something happens just by magic or by some special power. It's a great technique, and our politicians are using it. Why? Because it is a minefield to tackle this problem directly. It is a minefield of political incorrectness. But if we don't do it, there will be such trouble. But there already is going to be such trouble. We're in a war. The free world is in a war whether it likes it or not. And all of the things that we're doing to supposedly help it are making it worse. In bombing people out to the Stone Ages, and in all the collateral damage that's being done, and in propping up tin horn dictators, and et cetera, we are just fomenting more discord and making this sick, pathological ideology even more attractive to those who already find it, through their own character issues, all too attractive to begin with. We're setting up our own defeat because we won't confront the issue directly. How we think about things matters, and we need to confront and examine some of our own widely held beliefs, because we've got problems here. We're not as strong as we could be. We're not as free as we could be. We're not anywhere near as free as we used to be. Why? Because we can't trust each other. You know, I was telling a person, by the way, I'm going to give the number out again in case anybody wants to join the conversation at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Give us a call if you have a mind to share some thoughts, if you want to ask a question, Maybe you have a relationship question you want to ask. Maybe there's somebody in your life with a character impairment you'd like to have some information about. Maybe you want to share a story or two. Maybe you want to share some thoughts on the topic that we're talking about tonight. In any case, give us a call at 718-717-8296. Gosh, I almost forgot where I was. I was talking about looking in all the wrong places for the fix to this really formidable foe that we face. And this ludicrous notion, this absolutely ludicrous notion that we can solve any of our problems by passing more laws, it's just ludicrous. It is truly ludicrous. I was telling a friend at a conference about the first time that I consulted to a prison facility, being an expert in character disturbance and prisons having more than their fair share of some very significantly disturbed characters, even some psychopaths, plenty of sociopaths, many antisocials. I'm coming to the gates of this place, and on the fence, gate, barbed wire at the top, all this stuff, huge signs. No firearms, no drugs, then a whole list of contraband substances, from hydrogen peroxide to alcohol to tobacco, you name it. Can't do this, can't do that, can't bring in this, can't bring in that. Don't do this, don't do that, no cameras, no this, no that. All these rules right there for everybody. Now, everybody knows that in prison there is no shortage of any of that contraband. People bring it in all the time. They see that sign. There are all these rules. Guess what? They ignore the rules. They find a way around them. And when they can't bring something in, they use innovation, and they use average things. You cannot imagine the hundreds of ways that prison inmates have figured out to make instruments, weapons of some kind. They call them shivs. Out of you name it. You know, they might take the faucet handle off their sink and pound it into a knife. They might take a part of the inner spring of a bed and fashion it into something. A razor sharp wire for slitting someone's throat. It's just ridiculous that we think that somehow, by passing more rules, that people who are prone to just completely ignore those rules, or who set themselves above those rules, even care that we're making another. It's solely for the benefit of those who think that by doing something that we're protecting ourselves, that we're making ourselves safer. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's true insanity. You know, now in the Middle East, especially in the Holy Land, it's almost an oxymoron right there, isn't it? A place of such injustice, to call it holy. And by the way, at what grain of sand at what grain of sand that touches another grain of sand does that ground no longer become holy? I'd like someone to tell me that. You know, there has been so much blood spilled over that piece of real estate. And it's not the real estate that's the problem. It's what's in our hearts and especially what's in our minds. It's the way we tend to think. Our beliefs. And they need challenging big time. They need examining big time. And if we don't pay attention to that, we're in for a lot more heartache. And we need to quit paying any attention to what doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to the issue. We are not going to deal with this problem by abridging the rights of decent people. That's not going to do it. It's only the decent people anyway that pay attention to the rules and obey them. And they don't do that because of the rules. When good people, in my town, we now have the ability to recycle a lot of things. And we get these constant urges to recycle this and recycle that. But I don't know anybody that does that because we have all these basically commands to do this. Most of us, I know, we do it because we are environmentally conscious and we want to do our part to make this planet habitable. And we know that all of us contributes just a little bit to the erosion of our natural resources. And so we do our part. As a matter of fact, in my city, they don't even make it easy. For example, there are 4 or 5 things that we recycle, that we can recycle, that we can't leave out for our pickup people to take for us because they'll only sort 2 or 3 items. So if you put certain things like glass bottles in your recycle bin, they won't pick them up. Now, they do have a drop-off place where you can take them on your own. And by the way, if you have too many things and you take them there, they charge you for it. But if you're trying to be environmentally conscious, you take that extra effort. You make that extra effort. So what motivates people is what's in their heart. It's their core beliefs. It's the principles, the values they hold. Some people want to do their part. And they do. Now, these folks who came to this great land to do us harm, they found this ideology really attractive. And there's some elements of this ideology that traditionally dominance-seeking men have always found attractive. But a relatively new phenomenon has occurred in our character-impaired world. And that is that even women are finding elements of this ideology really, really attractive. The woman in this latest incident left her 6-month-old child. Left behind a 6-month-old child. That's some twisted thinking. You've got to hold some really perverted values to tell your own mother or mother-in-law that you're going to a doctor's appointment and just leave a 6-year-old baby and then go out and do your thing, knowing full well you might never come back, and being okay with that, thinking that you're going to be a hero in the eyes of the higher power you worship, the God you worship, or say you worship. It's thinking like this that has to be addressed directly. I was saying that in the Holy Land right now, there have been a rash of stabbings. That's the new thing. You see, the Israeli government saw to it with a lot of restrictions and a lot of extra effort militarily. They did a pretty good job of helping ensure that no one on the other side of the fence, on their side of the fence it's okay, but no one on the other side of the fence would have gun weapons. Not even those in charged with enforcing the law, which is why they have to remain an occupying force. So they've done a good job there. So instead of resorting to rockets, which they have in the past, they are able to smuggle in from time to time to these extremist groups. Ideologues are out stabbing folks because they have access to knives, making their statements that way. Now what are you going to do? Take away all the knives? Raid every home? Knives can be fashioned out of all kinds of things. I just mentioned that earlier. Prisoners know how to do this very easily. They can make one out of just about anything. We're not going to solve the problem that way. It's not the knives. It's not the pipes. Timothy McVeigh used fertilizer. It's not the bags of fertilizer. It's not the ammonia. It's not any of the things that we would seek to restrict and keep out of the hands of decent individuals with a solid moral compass and a belief system that's healthy. The evil that's out there lurks in the hearts and in the minds of those who want to dominate, who want to be in charge, who want the power, and who have either convinced themselves or been convinced that those of us who don't see things their way, who aren't of exactly like mind. And by the way, it's that way within factions of these crazy movements. They are equally at war with folks in their own so-called faith system or belief system that don't see things exactly the way they do. So Sunnis and Shiites have issues with one another. And within those groups, there are subgroups that have issues with one another. The ideology itself really needs some close examination, and that's politically incorrect, you know? Just like my college used to tell me, you know, you don't question somebody's value system, you don't make judgments, you don't pass judgment. Just like my colleagues used to advise me against, which I learned was completely off base, this whole notion that everyone's entitled to their own system of belief and that all belief systems are equal is crazy. It's crazy. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not suggesting that that means that we have the right to impose our beliefs on everybody else, especially, quote unquote, by the sword or by the gun or by any other means. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I am suggesting is that as a race, this human race must examine the way we believe, challenge the way we believe, way we truly believe, not what we say, not what we profess with our lips, but what we really hold in our heart. We've got some real tough times ahead of us. It's part of our growth. It's part of our continuing evolution. I'm going to share something with you. I wrote about this in the Judas Syndrome. I am not one of those people. I do believe in the powerful, powerful, eternal truths and messages contained in many of the myths that we have enshrined as sacred. But I am not of the belief that man is a creature who started out just fine, and then one of us, the first of us, screwed up right away, and everybody else because of that is paying for it, and so therefore we are a fallen species, a damaged goods, so to speak. We started out we were made perfect, and we broke ourselves, and now we're broken. I don't believe that. I believe that we are, and we always have been, growing, evolving, and that we're not there yet. We're not where we need to be yet. And that we've got a lot to learn. That's what makes us different. We have this incredible capacity to learn. That's what's gotten us where we are. And we have a lot more to learn. And one of the things that we're going to have to sort out is we're going to have to really sort out, very seriously, the kinds of values, the kinds of core beliefs that are really helpful and healthy to hold, versus those that only serve to divide us and wound us and disadvantage us. Character matters. Who we are matters more than anything. The very survival of the planet. Well, maybe not so. Maybe not the survival of the planet. Because, you know, there are those that say that if we succeed in destroying ourselves, the planet will go on. Other species will thrive. They don't depend on us anyway. We're at the top of the food chain. We're not anyone's natural dinner or any other species. Anyway, we're the only ones that prey on ourselves. P-R-E-Y. But certainly for the planet, for the race's sake, for the species' sake, for our own survival, if we're going to make it, we have to come to terms with what we really believe. Because our ideologies are what has gotten us into trouble. We've been here before, and we're here again. And whether it's the ideology in a free enterprise system run amok with folks who have no compass to guide them into how to prosper responsibly, and therefore can almost bring down an economy, or whether it's a radical ideology from outside that seeks to eliminate all those infidels who don't see things their way, the problem is still the same. How we think about things, the values we hold, the beliefs we entertain, the real beliefs that we hold, the ones that we hold at our core, not the things that we profess, but what we really hold in our heart. That's what matters. Character matters. And our survival as a species depends on an honest reckoning with those things. Our thoughts and prayers certainly are with the innocent folks who lost their lives a few days ago in this latest tragedy. There will be more. And this evening, at the close of the program, when the theme song plays again, that attempts to cherish those values and principles, those ideals that our country purportedly stands for, keep in mind that it all comes down to us. This country works only when we work. We will survive only when we deal with ourselves in an honest way, and when we confront the twisted thinking that can bring us all down, whether it occurs with us or whether it's in one of these radical ideologies from outside that threatens to take us down. So keep that in mind. Again, our thoughts and prayers are with those victims of the latest indication of radical ideologies running amok. And I hope to be with you again next week. Till that time, this is Dr. George Simon, wishing you all well. Pay us a visit at manipulative-people.com, and I'll see you again next Sunday evening for another edition of Character Matters. Thanks for tuning in. God bless you all.